Smith. I'm the founder of xGeographic. As Emily was saying, a lot of software development, but really identifying solutions for urban planning problems, environmental issues, kind of reverse engineering software backwards from some of the issues that we see. And one of those major issues that I've been working on for a few years is bike ped mobility. So let's get right into it. My presentation today is going to be pretty, I tried going as high level as possible so that I could really pull out some good nuggets of information from a very, I guess, conceptual high level perspective. So I'm really going to focus on barriers to mobility during the presentation. And the first barrier to mobility that I identified, and especially at night, are roadway design features. So for all the maps that I showed during the presentation, envision like you're looking at the city at night. So you can kind of say you're flying over the earth, you look down at Orlando. This is actually somewhat what it would look like. This is 21,000 points of interest that xGeographic has mapped for the 3-county area. And we're actually going to look at some information. Yes.
Real quick, I think we're looking at your version of this presentation because the slide's really small. So if you could just switch those screens out, that would be.
Is that good?
That works. Thank you. Yes,
Perfect.
I can see it. Perfect.
Glad I found that button really quickly. So yeah, just imagine that you're looking basically at the city at night. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at points of interest, but also roadway design features and things like that. So we're going to be switching between land use and transportation a lot. So these are the 21,000 points of interest, all the light ups here that you can see. Now what we're going to do right in the next map is cross-reference this with speed limits. So these are all of the points of interest where people walk and where people walk at night. Color-coded, the red ones that you see are located on roads with 40+ mph speed limits. So you can see that the places where people need to go or the access points are often located on roadways, in this case, 43.6% of parcels where there is no lighting. You do see a lot of patterns here. The 3 circled areas are downtown Sanford. Basically, the bulk of the city of Winter Park and downtown Orlando, they are typically located in the points of interest there are located on lower speed roadways. That's typically because that's older development. So that shows the trend that our newer development, our points of interest really tend to be on those higher speed roadways. You can also see right below downtown Orlando to the southwest, the I-Drive corridor. Now, when we zoom in, you can see that, again, Winter Park, the top circle there is very good in terms of speed limits. Downtown Orlando and also Edgewater. Next slide. So now we're going to do the same thing here, the points of interest, but now we're going to overlay that with roadways with 5 or more lanes. And once again, you see this time more than half of our points of interest are located along those roadways. So again, that means day or night, but particularly at night when there's a higher risk metric. A lot of these destinations where people are walking are located in pretty dangerous conditions. And not only that, we'll get to it later, but when you overlay the census information on this, you can see that there are 0 vehicle households. There are people with no vehicles, so they have to cross dangerous roadways to get where they want to go. Now here are 2 corridors at night showing 5 or more lanes, all the points of interest. The bottom blue circle there you can see is Mills Avenue. And if you live in Orlando, especially, if you're in a little bit younger demographic, there are a lot of bars and entertainment venues along that corridor. There's also on the east and the west, flanking residential areas. So people are crossing that roadway at night. So really what I'm trying to do here is start to zoom in and start to identify areas that we could potentially see bicycle and pedestrian risk heightened. And these are really the areas where if there's new technologies invented, as Maj is about to show, where do we start to focus in first to try to make the biggest bang for the buck and save as many people as possible in the shortest term possible. So this is the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council. When I worked there, developed Lotus. And it is land overlaid on transportation information system. Now, these are the bicycle and pedestrian output crash rates when certain roadway variables are present. So you can see the number of lanes. As the number of lanes goes up, obviously the bicycle and pedestrian crash rate goes up, but really focus on the turn lanes. So you can see that when no turn lane is present, there are pretty low crash rates. But once you add turn lanes where there are turning motions coming in, you can see that bicycle and pedestrian crash rate goes up. The next step is actually we're going to only look at nighttime crashes. So we're going to see if there's any variation between these variables in terms of nighttime crashes. So you can see that really it's about aggregating different roadway characteristics, not just speed and number of lanes, but also median coverage, things like that, and trying to identify or predict where future crashes are going to occur. So I'm going to get a little off topic here, but it's all going to gel in. So barriers to mobility, street network, and development patterns. I invented a word and it's called wetburbs. So they're wetlands that have been turned into suburbs or exurbs, really. And this one is in, I'm not going to call them out. It's somewhere in East Orange County. And you can see, I mean, the people who live in these basically new homes, last 10, 15 years, they have no hope in terms of being able to walk and bike to points of interest. So there's also that flip side issue of we're developing a lot of places where there really is nowhere to walk. And you can actually see this is the 1 mile walk zone using Wave software that's under development right now. You can see this neighborhood from the previous graphic is very, very close to the points of interest at the center there. But since the roadway network and there are no trail connections off the network, there's really not good accessibility in that area. Now this at the same scale is Winter Park. So let me go back and forth. These are at the same scale. So look at the change in accessibility. Granted, Winter Park does have more points of interest, but the grid street network really does a lot in terms of increasing accessibility. Not only that, we talked about it earlier, but Winter Park also has lower speed roadways. This third image is, and again, think of these at night. I color coded it this way so you can kind of think of it at night. This is the typical section Orlando. If you were to go to basically zoom in randomly in Orlando, this is what you'll typically see. So you can see the parking lots are actually light up here because you can walk through parking lots. But imagine that this is a low income area and that you live on the west side of that north-south roadway and you need to get to the other side. That's a huge barrier, especially if you don't have a car at night. So how do we focus in on the best areas possible for lighting condition solutions? And you can just see that this zooms out, that we have actually just begun exporting our access zones. What's important here is that we can actually break it down by type. So we have about 45 to 50 point of interest types, grocery stores, convenience stores, and I will get into why that's important a bit later. But really, you're able to see accessibility to different types of points of interest. And now lack of off-network bike ped infrastructure. This is a big issue because what if instead of going on that 45-mile-an-hour roadway to get to your point of interest, you take an off-network path to get there, or a nicely lit trail, something like that. So here is actually the yellow star is my parents' house, Sandlight Cove and Dr. Phillips. And you can see that this is the basically 15-minute walk zone, 20-minute walk zone to Dr. Phillips Community Park. You can see that that neighborhood right above it, Sandlight Cove, has no accessibility. They have to go all the way around and walk down Apopka Vineland just to get there. Now, what we're going to simulate here is the impact on accessibility if you put a trail right there. And spoiler alert, that trail exists. So after the park went in, they actually built this trail, this white dotted line that you see. And here, that is how the accessibility increases. So now my parents' neighborhood, they can easily get to that park instead of having to walk all the way around. So really, it's not just about on network, it's about off network. And I will come up with, a little bit later, I'm going to talk about some mathematical oh, no, here it is. So D human, the distance human divided by the distance automobile. Basically, what we can do is we can start to identify areas where if you need to walk to a point of interest, how far does it take in an automobile from where you're from? And then if there was a connection with the bike ped, how much could that reduce your walking time? So really starting to focus on what areas in what areas is the bird's eye distance that you travel, that utility obstructed by things such as cul-de-sacs and lack of trails, et cetera. Okay, now defining where. This is where it kind of all comes together in terms of points of interest. And also, as we were talking about earlier, is looking at census information. So income, percent of households that have zero vehicles, et cetera. And what you can see here, once again, using the LOTUS database developed by the Regional Planning Council, is the crash rates are actually extremely high. If you look at this right-hand column, the red numbers where grocery stores are present, markets are present, fast food, bars, liquor and tobacco stores. Number one was money loan stores. In Wave, with Wave software, we've actually broken down money loan into, we have banks and credit unions now. So it's likely that it's mostly the credit unions that generate those bicycle and pedestrian crashes. And once again, that could be because people who use credit unions tend to be lower in income and could tend not to have a car. So they're bike walk dependent. Now we're going to get really into the issue here, nighttime bicycle and pedestrian crashes. If you look at the red numbers, where are they near? Bars, entertainment venues, liquor and tobacco stores, and credit unions. So what this does is it gives us a land use context. It defines where. So when you were looking at those points of interest maps earlier, imagine if we narrowed it down to these types of points of interest in terms of identifying the riskiest areas for bicycle and pedestrian crashes at night. So think about a big data set that you filter down, and then that allows you to see those low-hanging fruit areas. There are also a lot of complexities, causal factors. Time of day is a big one. So nighttime is way more risky for a number of reasons, and then also human error, which we'll get into. So you can see that the crashes at night, statistically, as Emily was saying, I think about 76% of fatal crashes occur at night. So that's pretty intense. And you can see, if I go back 2 slides, these crashes were actually from 10 p.m. to 3:30 a.m. So it's really those not just dark conditions, but you know, that real deep night crashes. Now, what increases bicycle and pedestrian risk? Well, there's a lot of things. Obviously, limited visibility, but also you'll see in the crash reports. What project was it with Metro Plan Orlando? We were looking at it. Is a lot of the times when a person is drunk, the driver or the walker. It's not always the driver that's drunk, but if the walker is inebriated in any way, they tend to be way more likely fatal, right? So if there is one person drunk, either the driver or the bicyclist and pedestrian, the crash tends to be way worse when you boil down the data. Roadway curvature and elevation changes. We do have curvature here, as Mike Wilson says. He actually believes at Metro Plan, he believes that our lake system and actually may increase our bike ped crashes because of the change of curvature of the road. We don't really have elevation changes as much. But the point is that we can delve into these variables to identify those big picture areas for reverse engineered solutions, such as the one that Maj is going to show you. And it's pretty tough going before Maj, because you will see really the cool stuff that he's doing. So to kind of tie it all together, what's missing from this metric? Well, lighting conditions. So if we were to go in and see, okay, where are bicycle and pedestrians crashes occurring where there is not lighting present, or where the lighting is substandard? How can we identify lighting solutions that mitigate the risk in those areas? And then last slide, the kind of big picture solutions for improving mobility. I tried putting it into like one sentence. So retrofit streets, amend zoning and future land use codes, set access standards. Oh, and I can't see over there on the right side, but really just generate that big data so that you can take it to the director of planning, you can take it to a commissioner, you can say, this is exactly the data, here's why, and here's going to be the benefit of this project. That's what we need to do in terms of improving bicycle and pedestrian mobility. So a lot of exciting things coming, autonomous vehicles, the Dojo and LiDAR. There's really a war right now in terms of that. But you'll see in Maj's presentation, the autonomous vehicles, um,